of Common Sense America with Eden Cornell. Yeah.
And good morning, good morning, good morning. It is Thursday, December the 15th. Oh my goodness, it is Thursday, December the 15th. It is freezing cold here in North Carolina. We are getting a ton of rain, and I hear in the Northeast there is snow, there is icy rain. And there's a lot hitting the Northeast today and the next couple days. And it is, I tell you what, grab a great cup of coffee or a hot cup of cocoa or a nice warm cup of calming tea and sit right down and enjoy us here this morning here at Common Sense America. I'm Eden Hill. And for all of those who are tuning in this morning, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for your support of the show 4 months in. And I am just honored of all the powerful voices that have come to this show for this live podcast weekdays at 9 a.m. on YouTube, on Rumble, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. I tell you what, yesterday, your voices have been heard. Thank you so much for all of your support as we have been airing part 1 of the Jack Maxey interview and the Hunter Biden laptop. I tell you what, you guys are really just sharing your thoughts both privately and publicly with me on all the different sites. And thank you. Thank you for tuning in to such a powerful part 1 interview. Tomorrow will be the second part. And I tell you what, we're going to be bringing him back come New Year, which is only 2.5 weeks away. We're going to be bringing him back, and I'm looking forward to having him back here on the show. And as we are really focused on what is ahead for 2023, what is ahead for our kitchen table discussions, what's ahead for our families, our children, what's ahead for our faith in the public square, what is ahead for us? We have a lot to talk about. And one of my favorite groups, I'll start off by saying, is Young Voices. You guys hear me talking about them all the time. I absolutely love this group. They bring amazing commentary to Common Sense America, to you, the viewer, to you who care about our kitchen table discussions, our finances, our privacy, our energy, what is ahead for us in our nation's backyard and our children's education. What is ahead for us as we try and fill up those gas tanks and try and make ends meet and try and put food on the table? I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, but you guys all realize that that is what is going on in our nation. And, you know, we see the current person in the White House. I'm not going to call him the president because he's not my president. And I am not disrespecting the office of the president, but my goodness, that is not a United States president. You and I both know that. And, you know, every morning you do know where I stand as it pertains to what is happening in the DC Beltway. And I will tell you the truth. I'm not going to sit here and dance around anything. We're going to be talking about the truth here. And, you know, yesterday it revealed even more in the Maxey interview. The corruption that continues to basically infiltrate what the good of people are trying to do and trying to protect our precious nation, our precious America. So, you know, as we bring over to the show this morning, a Young Voices contributor, she is all about privacy. She is all about, her name is Leslie Corbly. And I would love for you guys to follow her on Twitter. If you don't have a Twitter account, that's okay. I'm sharing a ton of her work with you. She is a privacy policy analyst for Libertas. She's a contributor for Young Voices. And I tell you what, she just wrote this article about truck drivers. And for all of those out there who, you know, actually work, not the Biden generation, but those who really work, we have a lot of truck drivers out there that need our support. And she brings an interesting perspective to the table, and it's called Tracking Truckers. And the first quote I want to say here before I bring her over is this: yet again, the public is being asked to trade privacy for safety. This time, truckers are in the midst of a controversy sparked by a proposed rule creating a digital tracking system. So on that note, now we will bring over Leslie Corbly. Good morning. Welcome back to Common Sense. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. Where are you at right now? Are you in cold Washington, D.C., or are you somewhere else?
Thankfully, no. So I am I'm in Utah, which is actually pretty cold itself right now. We got quite a bit of snow the past few days.
Oh my goodness. Well,
But yeah.
Well, I hope you're staying warm. We are freezing here in even North Carolina. And being a northern girl, it's cold. It's very cold. So I'm so glad to have you back. Welcome back. As you heard, I was talking about your most recent article, Tracking Truckers. Hey, break it down for all of us, for the working man who watches this show either currently or after hours. Break it down for us. What's happening with our privacy and what's happening with our nation's truckers?
Sure. So the gist of it is the Federal Motor Carrier Administration. There, it's the FMCA. Is wanting to do so they did a proposed rule. It's not yet been it's not yet part of code, but the goal is to have electronic identification on each individual trucker's vehicle. So this would be in addition, and I think what I really want to hammer home for your viewers is the trucking industry is already very heavily regulated. It's not as if there's no regulations to ensure that truckers and their employers are following safety protocols when they're on the roadways. This would be allowing there to be an electronic component to that so that each vehicle could be kind of pulled up in a system more easily. And that, again, the goal is to say, okay, we're most efficiently allocating the resources of those who are there to ensure compliance, right, with current safety measures. But the problem is that whenever you make another rule for compliance, the firms that have to follow that rule then have to divert a lot of resources into ensuring they're following the rule appropriately. And anything digital, of course, as we know, is then potentially subject to security breaches or bad faith actors accessing information they shouldn't have. And so there's concerns, on the side of what are the compliance costs of firms having to address these issues. And then for truckers, individual truckers are concerned because it's going to have identifying information will be tied to their vehicle, right? When they're often they can be owner operators, is how some truckers operate in the space. So they're concerned about the privacy implications and potentially the unintended consequences of that type of a rule. Especially when, you think about it, it's not really tied. There's no clear safety outcome here, right? They're saying this is going to ensure better safety, but there's not really a lot to back that up, right? We already have weigh stations. We already, again, it's not as if there's no protocols in place to ensure that there's safety regulations that are followed on the roadways.
What are you hearing from truckers? What are you hearing from, are you hearing both sides of the coin? Are some saying, no, this is really good, and here are the applications and the reasonings of why it's good? Or are you hearing from truckers, no, stay out of my business. My privacy is my privacy. What are you hearing from them?
It seems as though there's a split in the industry regarding who is supporting this. So you have associations like the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators who support the measure, but the individual truckers have expressed in their comments. So the public is able to post comments to this new proposed rule, and their comments have been primarily not in favor of this it's not legislation, of this proposed rule, because again, their concern is that there haven't really been any meaningful steps taken to alleviate privacy concerns, or recognition, that there are these concerns to begin with. So there's really not been a lot of truckers coming out in support of this proposed rule. As it relates to the actual employers, some of the most major trucking industry folks, they have not come out in support either. I haven't seen a lot coming out in strong opposition, but generally you would expect to see their support on a proposed rule of this breadth. So it's really the administration itself, and by that I mean the Federal Motor Carrier Administration, and the some of the safety groups, those who administrate, that are saying this would be a better rule. Likely, I think you could hypothesize that has to do with how much more, it would be easier to track, right? So there's some
Right.
administrative efficiency there. Again, as to whether that translates to safer roads is a separate analysis.
Yeah.
And whether there's unintended consequences, I would argue probably most certainly yes.
Well, let's break this down from the privacy standpoint, since that is your bread and butter. And as you work with Libertas, and then you also work with Young Voices, what are your thoughts? Do you think this is just another aspect of invasion of privacy, or do you actually think the strategy here would be to the benefit of the trucker and then of those who are receiving their sources? Because I mean, I look around and I see truckers are already worked over and over, and they are so unappreciated. And that is very unfortunate that we live in such a society that puts them in a completely different space. And for them to have to go through yet another hurdle, I don't see how that is actually going to help them. It looks like it's going to hurt them even more. And, as I think ahead with what's happening with, with our energy crisis, and what's happening with, are we going to have food on the shelves of the supermarkets? Are the truckers going to be able to get from point A to point B? It just seems like more and more hurdles are happening for them. What are your thoughts in that whole circle of, it seems like a cyclical thing, and then you add this privacy issue to it?
So the privacy concern, this isn't the first time that federal administration has sought to place more restrictions or safety measures, if you will, on vehicles. Buried in what the third stimulus package was a rule that will require all cars coming to market in 2025 to have what's called a passive monitoring system to track the drivers, how they're driving, which is great. Again, if you're looking at this from a legal standpoint, say you're trying to establish liability after a wreck, having information about how someone drove can give you quite powerful indications of, say, whether, who was at fault. But I would argue that there's implications as far as the individual rights analysis of, should we really be subject to a passive monitoring system because it's easier to track liability? Should we have to subject ourselves to that just to use the roadway? It's sort of like this concept of, we're trying to make you more safe, so we're going to keep putting more almost infantilizing measures on individuals to ensure that safety is protected. Whether or not that actually leads to safer roadways, of course, again, is a separate, much more difficult analysis to prove, particularly if you start having these measures, right? You can't really run the counterfactual of, what would the roads be like without this? So there's those implications, and I would argue this is really in the same vein that you're seeing this. We want to have the ability to pull up any vehicle on an electronic system when queried. Again, is this necessary? Is this going to really make us safer, or is this just another way to track more things online and to have sort of maybe some administrative benefits without really thinking through the implications? So one of the individual truckers who runs the Specialized Carriers and Rigging Association is concerned with this rule, saying that there's just been and I'm quoting here, there is little to no recognition of the concerns motor carriers and drivers have continuously expressed about privacy and data security, and no indication that the FMCSA has taken any meaningful steps to alleviate these concerns. And so I think that kind of sums it up, right? Like, there's going to be, and I think I just want your viewers to understand when you say something like there's a electronic system that that can pull each individual vehicle when queried, there's a lot more that goes into that than just an ID pulling up, right? And so again, this is going to be high compliance costs for the firms, and really unclear as to what the privacy implications could be for the individual truckers involved.
Well, see, that's my I have three concerns. The money aspect, is it going to add more dollars in the long run to the individual truckers? Then I also say, is this when could this fully be implemented, that it would be truly enacted? And then my third thought is the insurance companies. So is this going to benefit insurance companies? Because you always say, where's the money trail leading? is that and the money aspect of this. I don't care about your privacy. I don't care about that. I just want your money. And that's what it the more and more of things that come out and these distorted thoughts of quote protection and for your privacy's sake, that's what that is. That's full on cow plop. That's what I'm going to say. You're Utah, I'm originally from Pennsylvania, I'm going to call it what I see it. So, my question is from that aspect, and I know you're covering it from the privacy standpoint, but from the dollar standpoint, is it going to be impacting insurance companies? And is it also going to be hurting the pocket of that trucker, of that individual trucker?
Well, truckers have expressed quite a bit of concern. So one of the concerns actually is that some truckers would be willing to leave the industry. Pre-Pass Safety Alliance, which is a nonprofit public-private partnership that has invested quite a bit of money into vehicle identification systems. So these are someone who already helps, or an entity that already works on safety on the roadways, is concerned the new rule will not only not result in safer roads, but instead could be kind of disastrous for the supply chain because it could result in truckers leaving the industry. So if enough truckers are concerned, and many have noted that they are deeply concerned, and they choose to find another line of work, that would obviously make it more difficult for goods to pass across the country in a timely fashion. And Alliance, the group I just quoted, has noted their concerns, with a driver shortage. They're basing that on a survey that was run in June of 2022 by Randall Riley. So these are folks in the industry that show that 27% of truckers have said they would leave the industry should the government require them to transmit identifying information digitally. And so whether that obviously ends up being true is of course another question, whether they would actually take that step. However, it certainly could have that end result, which would not, I don't think anyone would be pleased with a further exacerbation of already weak supply chains.
Right.
And it's not necessarily clear that how that would impact recruiting either, right? If you have a good number of truckers who choose to leave the industry to just do something else because it's become a rule they don't want to comply with, something that they just don't want to deal with personally, it's not necessarily easy to find people who want to be long haul truckers.
Exactly. And they're so underappreciated. They really are. They're the people that really put the food on the table, if you really think about it. At the end of the day, those supply chain breakages that, happen, sitting here in Eastern North Carolina, I have experienced a couple hurricanes. And we are about 2 hours from 95. And we experienced supply chain shortages because those truckers could not get to our stores here in Eastern North Carolina because of all the flooding. So magnify that with the supply chain shortages now of the Biden administration trying to, their authoritarian ways of, preventing us from actually living freely. So, I could go on and on in support of our truckers. And, from the privacy standpoint, from the bigger aspect of it, do you see, and I didn't prep you on this, but I just want to ask you if you have any idea of what's going to be coming down the pike in 2023 with this new Congress, new Republican Congress. Nancy has given over the gavel. She is moving on. Thanks be to God. And I sit there and say, what privacy concerns do we, the moms, the dads, the retirees, the military, the spouses, the veterans, the working single mom, the working single dad, what do we need to be aware of as we head into 2023 from a privacy standpoint? Is it the UPS, U.S. Postal Service guy just leaving something in our mailbox that we didn't know about? Or is it the, USPS guy who drops everything off and knows our routine? What, and I say that in a very facetious manner. I love our service members in that sense, but what do we need to be aware of come 2023?
I think really broadly speaking, you need to be aware that any digital device, which is why I think the vehicle aspect of this is interesting. Any device you have that could track you is where you're looking at risk. So even with your car, it is collecting a lot of data, that even when you just plug your phone into it,
Yeah.
right? Your anything that's connected to the internet could be a point of potential risk as far as are you being tracked. And I would really heavily encourage consumers to look into what it is they've agreed to and not agreed to when they're working with different companies that collect their data. I think that's especially true, not just like with your phone provider, although I would certainly look into that. That's a much more difficult problem to solve is what I mean. But whereas it comes to something like, I think the Twitter files did a great job of showing how much information Twitter had on you that you may not have known about, right? I don't think a lot of people who were on Twitter, and I can count myself among them, who had an account thought, oh, wow, you can potentially look at my direct messages.
Right.
So I think that these are the kind of things you really want to be aware of going forward is what information can the company actually acquire on me, and what are the limits there? And I mean very practical. So that's where some of these rules on privacy, I don't know if you are much familiar with the GDPR or California's CCPA, but these kind of regulatory bureaucratic solutions often have a lot of legalese in them that is not understandable really to the layperson, and also doesn't touch on concerns that the layperson may have.
Right.
I think most people care a lot more about whether an entity like Twitter can access their private messages than whether they get a pop-up consent notification for accepting cookies.
Yeah.
I mean, like, what's more really, like, practically speaking, what impacts the end user more, and what do they likely care about more?
Right.
I mean, I certainly care more about whether or not you can view the messages I'm sending to my friend than whether or not, I have whether or not you're tracking how long I'm spending on a website. So I think that's often where some bureaucratic solutions become not nearly as beneficial as they're billed. So I would really caution people to be wary of some of these solutions that come down that are top down in nature that say, oh, we're going to solve this privacy problem through legislation. That generally is not how problems like this are solved.
No,
so
not.
I would really encourage your viewers to think very deeply and intentionally about what services they want to use and not use. As their consumer, they have a voice. And I know, in some ways that's like saying go vote. You're likely not going to solve the problem alone, but you're certainly not going to solve the problem by not acting. And I think that, there are other services out there. So I'd really encourage individuals to search for privacy-centric services that aren't tracking you. Personally, I've been using DuckDuckGo for a little over a year now, and I honestly haven't noticed a major difference in my ability to find information I need. The searches are by and large fine, and I feel much better knowing that my search history isn't somewhere in Google's database, because I'm not using that search engine. So there are privacy-centric alternatives, even to phone services. Again, I know that's a much bigger leap, but when it comes to things like your social media, other things that really aren't necessary, there are a lot of things you can do to ensure that you're not being tracked. But when it comes to being tracked, it really, again, when you're looking at a new service that's anything digital, wanting to know what are they actually, what information are they able to see on me, and thinking of that in really practical terms, like, can you access my account? Can you see the messages I'm sending? Can you, what can you do with that? Because a way of thinking of the risk portfolio is if the information is not collected, it's not subject to being to being hacked or to being handed over to another third party. You may not want to have it, right? And also understanding that, again, I can't hammer this home enough, is that when you are entering into these commercial relationships, say you get a Twitter account, a Facebook, and I'm picking on them, but they're certainly not limited to them.
Pick away.
when you're entering in, when you use these services, you're entering into essentially a relationship with this company, and you should, just like any relationship you would have in person or with a individual, you should feel very comfortable vetting these firms to ensure that you feel comfortable using their service and handing over, aspects of your personal information to them, and feel as though that they're going to treat that personal information well. So I think that the individuals and consumers actually do have a role in solving this problem by saying we do or don't want to work with you. So there are solutions to this, but be cautious of top-down approaches and mindful of what you're doing in your digital life.
Yeah. Well, I also want to say this to the audience and to the moms, the dads, the retirees, the elderly, the spouses, all the above. As we sit here and listen to what you brought to the table, Leslie Corbly, I love the fact that you are such a privacy analyst at guru, and I want to keep bringing you back. But what I want to just bring in to that component is, you said DuckDuckGo is a great source versus Google versus all the other search engines. And then also, as if you are on Twitter, and I mentioned to my audience yesterday, I'm going to bring to you, knowing that you are not on Twitter, knowing that most of you don't have time for Twitter. You have to make a living versus being on Twitter, right? And Facebook, we'll pick on Facebook. You are right. You enter into a relationship where you need to have those boundaries and to not be sold out to the devil itself when it comes down to Facebook and their fake analytics and their algorithms and the censorship and things of that nature, because in actuality, they're going to take that and use that against you. I've seen that, and I'm not just saying hearsay. I've seen that happen to those who have certain beliefs. And with it becoming now more of the Meta versus the Facebook or whatever, and the money that they dump into the aspect of taking our individual pieces and our stories and whatever. So long story short, for the audience out there, use it wisely, but also there's better ways of communicating with people. And that is go knock on your neighbor's door and say hello, or text them, but also just be very aware of that. A final note for you with regards to, I just said texting. Are there phone companies that we also need to be aware of as it comes down to our privacy?
Well, there actually is a phone company. I've been in contact with the owner. The phone company is named Volta, VOLTA.
Okay.
And so that is an option. The owner has built out it's essentially a de-Googled Android phone, so it does not track your information. So again, VOLTA, if you're going to look that up online, that's about as much information as I have to date. Your listeners may hear more about this in the future, but that is an alternative phone service that you could. It's really not any more expensive than the other commercial alternatives. So that would be a way to go, okay, I really don't like being tracked, but I like the convenience of certain apps and whatnot on my phone. So you'll probably be hearing me talk more about this, because I'm really personally looking at how do I transition myself to some of these other surfaces that I think are really good, that could be a good way for viewers and those who follow me and my work to see the alternatives, what they look like. And I think a lot of people have in their head that it's going to be really, really difficult to transition to a privacy centric life. I don't think it's as complicated as people have in their head. I think it's a problem that's perceived because of the fear and complexity of, what would life look like, which is understandable. I mean, I thought about deleting Facebook at least a few times over. Really, I think it was since 2017, 2018, where I thought, man, I should just delete this. And it wasn't until 2020 that I did. And I could tell you, I had in my head that I thought I would miss it, and I don't at all. Because your life doesn't, the people you want to see in your life are still there. And there's a lot of other digital ways of communicating that don't involve Facebook. Now, I'm not telling everyone they have to go delete their Facebook account or their Meta account. Like, if that's bringing value to your life, carry on. But I do think they should be aware of, maybe there's some aspects of your digital life that you prefer to flow through a different application that's more secure, right? I mean, I think I've known quite a few people who have said, I'm a little more careful of what I put in maybe Facebook Messenger or WeChat, right? So there's lots of other alternatives. Signal's a great one, of course, for texting, for basic texting. And I believe they're having better group chat, and I want to say, was it story options? So again, there's lots of innovation in this space. So I'd really encourage your listeners to look at privacy-centric models for a lot of these services, because it's coming. And I think trying to support entrepreneurs who care about your privacy is really important long term, because I don't think we should get stuck in a mindset of thinking this is the way it always has to be in the digital world, right? I think there are ways to move towards more privacy centric models. It's just a matter of if those entrepreneurs don't have any clientele, it's gonna be really difficult for that innovation
Right.
to continue. And so I think, from a free market standpoint, we should very much care about what companies we're engaging in business with, and saying,
Right.
is this the company that I want to work with in this capacity? And I know obviously your listeners are very busy, and there's a lot happening in life, but I do think it's worth the time to sit down and go, are there simple ways I can, simple things like transitioning from one texting app to another,
Yes.
is something you can do with relatively minor convenience costs.
Mhm. Well, if you are able to, if you have an article or anything that you can cite, or if you put anything together, do let us know, because I would love to share that with the audience, on all the pages on my media site where people go and see all of the interviews that I've done. And I always put a description in there for them and tools, sort of applications. So on that note, if you have anything that ends up coming out like that, please let me know. I'd love to have you come back and kind of do a tutorial for this audience, since our time is very limited and we want some great tools to be able to apply for our privacy. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you, Leslie Corbly, contributor, Young Voices, and author of Tracking Truckers. Follow her on Twitter. And I think that's the only place, right? Since you took down your Facebook?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn as well, and I have a website, lesliecorbly.com, that hosts all my content. So you can subscribe there, or I'll actually also be, in the new year, look for a new Rumble account, which will be upcoming. So
fabulous. I look forward to having that. I'm on Rumble. I love Rumble. So great plug for Rumble. Well, you have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and I look forward to seing you come New Year. Thank you so much for joining Common Sense this morning.
Thanks so much. Always a pleasure to be on.
Okay. Bye-bye. Stay warm. Bye. For all of those who are tuning in, this is Common Sense America. It is about 9:32 a.m. Eastern Time here in very cold and rainy Eastern North Carolina. And we have a new feature coming on to the show just about at 9:35 this morning. And her name is Tirzah Duren. I love her name. It's absolutely beautiful. And she is on staff for American Consumer Institute. She is a policy analyst, and she previously worked at the Commonwealth Foundation, which is in Pennsylvania. So we'll be bringing her on to the show in just a few minutes. And until then, I'm going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Thanks for joining this Thursday morning. Stay warm. Well, thanks to each and every one of you for joining Common Sense America. I am Eden Hill. It's Thursday, December the 15th, and it is freezing cold and rainy here in Eastern North Carolina. And I know the whole Northeast is being impacted by snowstorms and ice storms. So, to all of my family and friends, all the way to Maine and down here to North Carolina, please be safe and stay off those roads and grab a hot cup of cocoa and pick up a good book. I want to just show you guys a couple stocking stuffers of books I've read already. Debbie Maycomer, a lighthearted book. I absolutely love her books. This one's Jingle All the Way, and it came out last year. It's a great stocking stuffer. You can still order it on Amazon if you're looking for last-minute gifts for your spouses, your kids, your aunts, your uncles, your nieces, etc. Also, a little bit heavier of a book from the spiritual sense, but it's still a great read. Is the newest book that just came out by Lisa Turkis. It is called Good Boundaries and Goodbyes. And absolutely love this book. And it's all about boundaries and it's all about God boundaries. And you know how I am about my faith here at Common Sense America. It's very important to me. And then finally, this is a heavy one. This is not a stocking stuffer. This is the huge and amazing Bible produced by Candace Cameron Bure and Dayspring, I believe. And it's also on QVC. I got it off of Amazon. It is a perfect Bible and a study tool. If you are in a Bible study, if you just started one, or if you're completing one, it has in the side opportunities to writing notes. It has definitions in the back. It makes the studying the scriptures just really powerful, and absolutely love it. It's a great gift. They have a men's Bible that's not hot pink. It's blue. If you wanted to get one for your father, your uncle, the men in your life. Also, just a great buy. You can still get things. I'm still getting shipments from Amazon for the Christmas holiday. So just as a word out there to each and every one of you as you are getting ready and the final countdown to Christmas. So on that note, I'm excited to bring over to the show a brand new guest, thanks to my dear friend Kirsten Fedewa, who's in Washington, D.C., and who put on a spectacular event last night for our veterans at the Capitol Hill Club. And we have been friends for many years since we both worked together on Capitol Hill a long time ago. And she introduced me to a phenomenal policy analyst. Her name is Tirzah Duren. And it turns out she was in Pennsylvania, and I am from the great state of Pennsylvania. So we may be talking a little bit of Pennsylvania politics, but also talking about energy policy and what is ahead for our nation as it comes to this very, very cold winter ahead. So on that note, I am bringing over, good morning, Tirzah. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
Good. It's so nice to meet you. Welcome to Common Sense America.
You too. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So where are you based out of?
I am in Arlington, Virginia, so just right outside of DC.
Yes. Know it well. All those years of living there. So I'm so glad to have you here. I was actually looking at a lot of your different links that you sent me with American Consumer Institute, but one that I noticed I was studying that you had just written, and it is called Energy Policy Should Be Pragmatic, Not Political. And I'm going to put up on the screen for our kitchen table audience, our moms, our dads, our retirees, our military spouses, and our veterans. I break it down for them with the kitchen table conversations. What's going to be affecting their back pockets? What's going to be affecting their children? And so I pulled some pieces from your article, but could you break it down for us? As I have right here the inflation percentages, the energy prices, but could you break it down for us? What do you see on the forefront for the American family as we head into the winter season?
When we look at energy to the winter season, prices are expected to go up. We have the 13% energy inflation. But when you really dive deeper, prices are going to go up possibly even more than that. The Energy Information Association put out some estimates. And so the average cost for American families to heat their homes this winter can be anywhere between 5% higher to 28% higher than it was last year, depending, of course, on their heating sources and where they live in the nation. Mm-hmm. But the good news is, and I did mention it in the article a little bit, is that when you look at the price increases that Americans are facing versus what you're seeing over in Europe, we are faring better. And part of that has to do with the fact is we do produce a lot of our own energy. And while we are still susceptible to some of the global energy markets that get disrupted with decisions from OPEC Plus and the Ukrainian crisis right now, we are a little bit more insulated from that.
Okay.
And so the good news is that's really a lesson to be learned when it comes to energy policy, is that producing our own energy does protect us from some of these global surges. And while we are facing increased prices, it's nothing like what you're seeing in Europe. So it's relatively better.
What can we talk to Europe for just a hot second? What will they be experiencing, come the winter and the darker months? I don't want to sound like Biden, but I'm going to say that, they use that term all the time, and I don't like it. I think it's very disrespectful to the audience. So what are your thoughts on what's going to be ahead for Europe, and where can we, with our energy policy, can we be of assistance to them at all? Can you break that down for me a little bit?
So what you're seeing in Europe is you're seeing just a surge in energy prices, where we're increasing between 5 to 20%. They're doubling, and their costs are in some just exponentially higher. And the reason why you're seeing that in Europe is they are way more dependent on Russian energy sources than we are in the United States. So what's going on in Ukraine is impacting them a lot more. You're looking at some of the governments asking private citizens to reduce their energy use. You're looking at potential rolling blackouts. You're talking about access. You're talking about affordability. So when you see what's happening in Europe, it's really just the fallout in a lot of ways of the Russian situation. And that's really unfortunate for them. And when you see it, the US, the thing with the energy policy is by the time people really start to notice it, short-term fixes are not an option. And so, yes, there is, if you want to build like different infrastructure, different trade agreements, different energy sources, there is the potential for the US to be a bigger player on the global stage. But a lot of what the US energy policy is going to do is it's really going to impact the Americans' access to energy, which overwhelmingly we do produce a lot of our own energy, but you still see some of those impacts. But from the policymaker perspective, what you really want to see is just embracing the domestic production of our energy. And specifically what you see is you see kind of like this energy over that energy, or we like renewables, but we don't like fossil fuels. And so when I said, when you need energy policy to be pragmatic and not political, it's embracing all of the energy and embracing all of the different ways that we can meet our demand. And while renewables, they'll probably grow and get better, and, who knows where we'll be in 10, 20, 30 years. But right now, we rely overwhelmingly on fossil fuels for the vast majority of our energy needs. And I think we really just have to embrace that reality that they're not going anywhere anytime soon.
Well, I noticed in one of your articles, I'm going to pull it up here. I'm trying to, hold on a second. I have it highlighted here. You also mentioned in this same article, another approach to energy prices comes from Republicans in Congress. You said Steve Scalise, Louisiana, Beth Van Doon, Texas, published a joint op-ed introducing their plan to maximize production of reliable, cleaner, American-made energy and cut the permitting process time in half. While the policy specifics have yet not been planned out, this plan focuses on increasing domestic production by addressing the current permitting process with a goal of establishing energy independence. So do you think we will see this in the new Congress? Obviously, since we're in a lame duck session right now, what are your thoughts come New Year? And what are your thoughts on, my biggest concern is I look at the Northeast, being from Pennsylvania. I look at my parents who are retirees. I look at that age group. And my concern is, from New York all the way down with my family in there, just, are they going to be efficient enough with what's happening, from the government standpoint and also from the state standpoint? And I know you worked at Commonwealth, and I know we have a lot of similar thoughts on the rulings of the Tom Wolf regime. So I guess my question to you is this: what do you see ahead for the Northeast, specifically with winter and with all of these energy policies, and then also 2023 new Congress?
When we're looking at the Northeast, that is one of the areas where prices are going to increase above the national average.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was talking about 5 to 28% price
Mm-hmm.
increase, that's the national average.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at more of that in the Northeast. And then when you're looking ahead, it's difficult to protect. The crystal ball questions are always difficult.
Yeah.
We have, it's a Republican plan. I think there's room for bipartisanship on the specific issues, specifically when they're talking about just reducing the permitting process. And a lot of the energy crisis and the energy inflation that we've been experiencing for the past months at this point has really demonstrated the need for domestic production. And you have the Biden administration that originally ran on zero drilling on federal lands. They've walked that back. They are talking about reducing permitting times. And so it's hard to see how it goes, but there should be able to be a path forward to at least talk about the very pragmatic issue, which is reducing permitting times. And, you have lawmakers that some of them want to move towards green energy. Some of them want to do solely American energy, no imports, no nothing. So there has to be room in the middle to talk about an actual solution. And my hope is that the permitting offers that path forward for both sides of the aisle to come together and help really meet these needs.
Let me ask you this. With your time at American Consumer Institute and having been at Commonwealth and seeing just how Pennsylvania was and still is, looking at the Senate elections of Fetterman and kind of going a little political with you here for a second, and you're welcome to say yes or no. But my questions to you will be, as we head into 2023 with this new Congress and seeing how Fetterman was elected, do you think the Commonwealth itself will be suffering even more than what it has been from the state standpoint, but then also from the standpoint of him being elected as senator? Do you think he's just going to basically roll with how he did his other leadership roles, not doing anything and showing, and I'm gonna say the things, you don't have to say anything. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but just knowing that you have that background, I'm glad to have somebody from Pennsylvania, originally, talking about these topics that are very important to me, because I served Senator Santorum. I worked in the great state of Pennsylvania. I worked with Congressman Joe Pitts, and so Pennsylvania is very important to me. But I also don't want it to see the constituency of Pennsylvania just wither up like a modern day Russia. And in many senses, in some ways, it looks like that.
When you look at Pennsylvania, one of the things, and I did focus quite a bit on energy policy in Pennsylvania, because it's a major energy producer with the Marcellus Shale. But what I see there is it's very similar to what I see going on across the rest of the country, where it's really villainizing certain energy sources or certain sectors of energy production, and then really putting other types on the pedestal. There was the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which was a major issue when I was in Pennsylvania, and then current Governor Wolf really tried to go and get that regulation enacted. And what that policy basically was, it was a cap and trade for CO2 emissions. And so some of these bills, they can get passed and they villainize traditional energy sectors on this premise of we want to be more environmentally friendly. And there's room for kind of like a middle of the aisle approach to this is when we look at environmental policy, we need to realize that airflow and oxygen doesn't stop at state lines.
No, it doesn't. That fabulous quote. I want to use that one again.
And so when we're talking about it, I mean, if we are reducing our domestic production, the demand for energy doesn't go anywhere. So what we end up doing is we have to import more. And what we find is the U.S. does actually have pretty good environmental impact and pretty good regulation. So producing here is a win-win for people who want to produce domestically, but also for those who do want to protect the environment. Even, our neighbors to the north in Canada, which is where of the petroleum imports that we get, most of it, I think 51%, come from Canada. And as far as the CO2 like impact concentration, we have better impact than Canada. So when we're looking at a lot of these bills, especially with the Greenhouse Gas Initiative, where it really is capping and trading energy emissions, we're focusing on let's reduce our emissions without actually focusing on the global issue. And if you are passionate about it, you know, climate emissions, what have you, then producing domestically is really it's the practical path forward. And I think a lot of times lawmakers want to be able to be like, oh, we reduced our emissions, but they're not talking about what that actually did for the global problem.
Exactly. On that note, I am so glad to have you here. I would love to have you back. I'm grateful for Kirsten introducing us. I absolutely love the way you think, and I've been loving reading about American Consumer Institute, and grateful for what you are doing, and look forward to having you back come new Congress. I would love to break down some of the new energy bills and what's going to be coming down the pike. So, and I love your name. It's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I watched a couple interviews to make sure I was pronouncing it right, because pronouncing a name is so important.
Yeah, you did a good job, and it's always a gamble because half of the people pronounce it wrong. So.
Well, I usually go in and look at different interviews with my guests before I have them on, just to make sure. And some I just butcher, and they understand, because they have these amazing Polish names. If they're just like, don't worry about it, or Italian names, or just like say the first name, you're good to go. So I'm grateful for you to join us here at Common Sense America for the first time, and look forward to having you back. And I look forward to staying in touch with you. But thank you for bringing this powerful analysis of the powerful impacts of energy, and especially in the Northeast. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to you.
Merry Christmas. See you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And for all of those who are tuning in, this is Common Sense America. And that was Tirzah Duren, policy analyst for American Consumer Institute. Follow her on Twitter at TZ Duren, Duren, right there at the lower half. I am grateful for Kirsten Fedewa and just the interviews that she brings to the table. And she brought to the table American Humane Society and also Special Operations Association of America, and her powerful event last night on Capitol Hill, and also with Tirzah Duren. So we look forward to having her back to the show. And, you know, I wanted just to send out a couple program notes. I am grateful for all of your support to Common Sense America. You can go to edengordonmedia.com. I have a lot of my show interviews posted there, a lot with other commentary. And then in addition to that, my Rumble page is really growing, and I'm grateful for that. I've been receiving comments since I posted Maxie's interview yesterday, and then also on YouTube. My YouTube page is growing. Also to Money with Talk with Melanie, 98.7 The Coast. Grateful for your support. Thank you for sharing my episodes on all of your social accounts. Also to Barbara from Harlem and BB Reed, thank you. And the Blue Network, thank you for your support. Will Baker, thank you for your music every morning I bring to the show and my show opener. I'm grateful for you. And then also just to my ladies' Bible study. We gathered yesterday, and it was the best thing ever. Ladies, gentlemen, if you need some soul nurturing and soul food, get with people who you know will lift you up and love on you and be gracious to you and pray over you and surround you with just powerful words of encouragement, of faith. And you know what? Yesterday, I was able to be surrounded by an afternoon of amazing women who are just soul food for my soul nourishment, soul food for my spirit. And I'm grateful for their prayers, their friendship, their wisdom, their encouragement. And they absolutely positively are such supporters of Common Sense America. So I am just really very grateful for them and all that they have done to support my candidacy as I was running for an elected office. And also now with my work here at Common Sense America, I bring weekdays to you from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern Time, a daily podcast talking about the common sense issues, the kitchen table discussions. What is ahead for our nation? What is ahead for the American family? What is ahead for our faith in the public square? What is ahead for our next generation? And the power packed interviews that we bring here, I'm trying not to bang on my desk because I know you guys can hear that, but I just get so excited about those types of people that we are talking with. Next week, we are going to be, talking. It is headed into the Christmas season. We're going to go light on some issues, and then depending on what is happening in the great state of Florida, depending what's happening in our nation's capital, depending what is happening in and around pop culture and the Christmas season, we'll be talking next week. We have some new guests coming next week as well. And I'm just grateful for meeting these amazing commentators and analysts as it pertains to our gun rights. Yes, our gun rights. And Friday, we'll be bringing over a new Young Voices commentator to talk about our gun rights again on tomorrow morning. And then we're going to finish up with the Maxi interview on the Hunter Biden laptop. So get ready, grab your hot cup of cocoa, your coffee, your tea, and just settle in for an hour of information that I study, that I want to make sure that you have at your kitchen table, and that you can make even more powerful decisions for you and your family. That's what it really all comes down to: God, country, and family. And this is the best way to expose truth and to bring light to subjects that you may not either hear about, or if you do hear about, is coming from a different analysis in the media and the scare tactic aspects of media, which I don't agree with whatsoever. So on that note, I just received a really great comment from Kirsten Fedewa. She is the one that put me in touch with Tirzah, and an energy to independent America is so important to keeping inflation costs down. Completely agree. Thank you, Kirsten, for introducing us. She is an amazing gift, and I look forward to having her back here come New Year as we head into the new Congress. On that note, we just have 2 minutes left. And if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, guest suggestions, please send them my way. And we look forward to having you guys back here tomorrow. And also, on a final note, that PSA I put out the other day, common sense PSA when it comes down to the holiday season, what is happening in and around us, and just knowing that you matter and that you matter to Jesus is most important. And I just want to reiterate that one once again. Yesterday, when I was with our ladies' Bible study for our luncheon and then a little birthday party for one of our ladies, we were sitting here talking about the fact that each one of us had never really verbalized the fact that this Christmas season just seems so different. And the holiday season just seems really different. So on a positive note, we are all coming together to support one another and to remind each other what the real reason of this season is, and that we matter, that you matter, that your life matters to Jesus. And more importantly, having a relationship with him is like top notch. And my friend Chris DeGaulle, who I adore, I've known him for years. He has 9:90 a.m. morning drive at Philadelphia. He even said it again this morning too. He said, at the end of the day, it's not the government, it's not people, it is your relationship with Christ, which matters the most. So you heard it from me and you heard it from Chris. And I am, if you have not had a chance to go to Chris's show, morning drives from 6 to 9 a.m. He gets me up in the morning. I'm grateful for him. And he has faith. He has politics. He has human interest stories. He talks about his wife and his personal journey and their education pursuits to make sure their children had the best education and they were not indoctrinated with all the liberal cowplop that happens in Philadelphia and the Chester County area. Unfortunately, I love my home state, but that's what's happening there. And he talked a lot about his wife's blog and her podcast, which if you haven't had a chance to go listen to it, I highly recommend it. I will find the link and post it on my Facebook page for you guys who are seeking other educational opportunities for your family, for your kids. And also just remember, Moms for America, Moms for Liberty. And just, remember all the different aspects of what we've been talking about here at Common Sense America to prevent the indoctrination and also to have that faith-based education that Futures in Education focuses on for Brooklyn and Queens and 2 boroughs of New York City. On that note, it's 10 a.m. Eastern Time, Thursday, December the 15th. Have a blessed day. I'll see you guys tomorrow.